the first time my mother said no, I thought she hadn't understood what I was asking. I was standing outside the pediatric oncology wing with my phone pressed so tightly against my ear that my hand hurt. My 9-year-old son, Noah, had just been taken back for another round of tests. His leukemia had returned. Not maybe, not possibly, returned. The doctor had used the word relapse, and everything after that felt like I was hearing it underwater. "Mom," I said again, "I only need help with Lily and Mason during Noah's treatments, just a few days each week." The hallway smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. A little boy wearing a superhero cape rolled past me in a wheelchair. Somewhere nearby, a machine started beeping. Then my mother's voice came through the phone. 12 weeks is a long time, Fiona." For a second, I genuinely thought she was agreeing. I almost cried from relief. Then she continued, "Your father and I already have plans." I blinked. "What?" "We have commitments." I stared at the floor. The pale blue hospital tiles suddenly looked sharper than they should have. "Mom, we can't just put our lives on hold." I laughed, not because anything was funny, because my brain couldn't process what she had said. "My son has cancer." There was a pause, not the kind of pause people make when they're shocked, the kind they make when they're annoyed. "We know that." I felt something cold settle inside my chest. "Then how are we having this conversation?" "Fiona, don't start." "Start what?" "The guilt." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear. I wanted to make sure I had heard her correctly. The guilt. Apparently asking grandparents to watch their grandchildren while one of those grandchildren fought leukemia counted as guilt. When I put the phone back against my ear, my father's voice joined the call. "We raised our children already." I closed my eyes. The oncology nurse walked by and gave me a sympathetic smile. She had no idea what conversation I was having. "We aren't available," my father said, just like that. Not sorry, not maybe later, not let us think about it. Simply unavailable, like I was asking them to help move furniture. Like this wasn't life and death. Like Noah wasn't sitting 20 feet away waiting to hear whether his treatment plan had changed. I swallowed hard. "Okay." "Good," my father said. Then he hung up just like that. The line went dead. And something inside me did too. Part 2, nobody tells you how exhausting hope can be. People talk about grief. They talk about loss. They talk about heartbreak. But nobody talks about the months before those things happen. The months where you keep hoping. The months where every phone call makes your stomach drop. The months where every cough, every fever, every lab result feels like it might change everything. For the first few weeks after Noah's relapse, I lived inside that kind of hope. Every morning started before sunrise. Every night ended long after midnight. And somehow there were never enough hours in between. The treatment schedule became our entire life. Mondays were blood work. Tuesdays were chemotherapy. Wednesdays were specialist consultations. Thursdays were monitoring appointments. Fridays were usually emergency visits for whatever side effect appeared that week. I learned more medical terminology in 3 months than I had learned during the previous 33 years of my life. But none of it solved my biggest problem. I was one person, and I had 3 children. Every appointment required impossible decisions. Every day felt like choosing which child needed me most. The guilt never stopped. Not for a second. One afternoon, I was helping Noah into the car after treatment when he suddenly grabbed my sleeve. "Mom." "Yeah, buddy." "You look tired." I forced a smile. "I am tired." "You should sleep." I laughed softly. "When?" He actually thought about it, then shrugged. "Good point." For a moment, we both laughed. Then the laughter disappeared, because both of us knew why I was tired, and neither of us wanted to say it. The drive home was quiet. Rain tapped against the windshield. The sky looked gray enough to disappear. When we got home, Lily ran outside immediately. "Mom, Mason spilled juice again." "How much?" "A lot." "Define a lot." She pointed toward the living room. Oh, it was indeed a lot. Mason stood in the middle of the mess looking guilty. "I tried cleaning it." "No, you didn't." "I thought about cleaning it." That made Noah laugh. For a few seconds, he looked like himself again. Not a cancer patient. Not a child fighting for his life. Just a 9-year-old boy laughing at his little brother. Those moments became everything. I started collecting them mentally, like photographs. like proof that normal life still existed somewhere beneath the fear. Because fear was everywhere. Every conversation, every thought, every decision, especially when the medical bills started arriving. I already had insurance. Good insurance. At least I thought I did. Then the invoices came. Hundreds, thousands, more thousands. Every envelope felt heavier than the last. One night I sat at my kitchen table staring at the numbers. Noah was asleep upstairs. The younger kids had finally stopped arguing and gone to bed. The house was silent, except for the refrigerator humming. And me trying not to panic, I opened my laptop, checked my savings account, then checked it again. The numbers didn't magically improve. I rubbed my eyes, trying to think, trying to find solutions, trying to stay calm. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. For a second I thought maybe she was calling to help. Maybe guilt had finally reached her. Maybe she had realized what was happening. Maybe, hello. Hi, sweetheart. Sweetheart, I hadn't heard that word in weeks. My chest tightened. Hi, how are things? I stared at the wall. How are things? As if she didn't know. As if I wasn't posting updates after every appointment. As if she hadn't ignored every request for help. They're difficult. Oh, silence. Then, your father and I were wondering if you'll be attending your cousin Rachel's anniversary dinner next weekend. I actually laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh. What? The dinner. I waited. Surely there was more. There wasn't. She was serious. My son was receiving chemotherapy, and she wanted an RSVP. Mom, what? I'm spending most of my time in a hospital. Well, family events still matter. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just disbelief. The kind that slowly turns into understanding. The kind that shows you who people really are. I don't think we'll be there. Oh, her disappointment sounded genuine, and somehow that made everything worse, because she cared, just not about the things that mattered. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to understand how two realities could exist at the same time. My reality, and theirs. In mine, every day was survival. In theirs, I was missing dinner plans. The gap between those realities felt impossible to cross, and it only got wider. A week later, Noah developed a fever, then another, then another. Suddenly, we were back in the hospital, again. The doctor looked concerned, which immediately terrified me. Doctors usually tried not to look concerned. That was part of their job. When they started looking worried, everyone else should be worried too. I sat across from Dr. Patel while Noah slept. The room smelled sterile. The fluorescent lights buzzed quietly overhead. What's happening? Dr. Patel folded his hands. We're seeing complications. My stomach dropped. What kind of complications? We're adjusting treatment. That wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. I stared at him. Eventually he sighed, then spoke more carefully. We aren't getting the response we hoped for. The room suddenly felt colder. I looked toward Noah. His head rested against the pillow. His favorite blanket covered his legs. His stuffed dinosaur sat beside him, 9 years old. 9. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means we need to prepare for several possibilities. I hated that sentence. I hated every version of it. I hated how doctors used it when they couldn't promise anything. I hated how calmly it was delivered. I hated how much fear it contained. When I left the hospital that night, I sat in my car and cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Hands on the steering wheel, head lowered. Trying to release enough pain to keep functioning tomorrow. Then my phone rang. Derek, I answered immediately. Hey, how is he? I couldn't speak for a moment. Derek understood, because the silence told him everything. Oh God, I finally exhaled. They're worried. Another pause, then, what do you need? I almost said help. I almost asked again, but something stopped me. Because every time I asked for help, people disappointed me. So instead I said, I don't know. And for the first time in months, that answer was honest. I genuinely didn't know. I didn't know how to save my son. I didn't know how to be strong enough. I didn't know how much time we had. I didn't know anything anymore. The next few weeks blurred together. Hospital, home, hospital, home, hospital, home. Meals became whatever was fastest. Sleep became optional. Work happened whenever possible. The world shrank until it consisted of treatment rooms, medication schedules, and fear. Then one afternoon, Noah asked a question that still follows me. We were sitting together watching cartoons. Neither of us was really paying attention. The television glowed softly across the room. Rain tapped against the window, and out of nowhere he said, "Mom, yeah, if I die, will Lily remember me?" Everything stopped. The air, my heartbeat. The room, everything. I turned toward him. "What? If I die?" I immediately shook my head. "No, Mom, no, Mom." His voice stayed calm, too calm. That terrified me. Children aren't supposed to sound that calm, not about death. Not about themselves. I reached for his hand. "You're not dying." He looked away, then quietly said, "The doctors don't look happy anymore." I couldn't answer, because he was right, and because he had noticed, and because children always notice more than adults think they do. I squeezed his hand tighter. "I'm not giving up." He smiled, a small smile, the kind that breaks your heart because it's trying to comfort you. I know. That night I cried harder than I had cried since the relapse, not because of what he asked, because of why he asked, because somewhere inside him he already knew something I wasn't ready to accept, and deep down, I think I knew it too. What I didn't know was that we were only weeks away from the moment that would change everything. The moment that would leave me a mother of 2 instead of 3. The moment that would expose exactly who my family really was. And when that moment came, the people who couldn't spare a single afternoon to help would suddenly have plenty of time to show up. Just not for the reasons anyone would expect. The call came at 4:17 in the morning. For a few seconds, I didn't understand why my phone was ringing. I had fallen asleep in a chair beside Noah's hospital bed. My neck hurt, my back hurt, everything hurt. The room was dark except for the glow of monitoring equipment. Then the phone rang again, and my heart immediately started racing, because nobody calls at 4:17 in the morning with good news. Nobody. I grabbed the phone. The screen showed an unfamiliar hospital extension. Before I could answer, a nurse entered the room. Her expression told me everything. Everything. Before a single word was spoken, my stomach dropped. "Noah," I whispered. The nurse moved closer. "Fiona," I was already standing, already panicking, already shaking. "What happened?" The nurse looked devastated, and that was when I knew, not suspected. Knew, the kind of knowing that happens before reality catches up. The kind that destroys your life in a single second. The next few hours passed in fragments. Doctors talking, forms being signed, people asking questions, machines being disconnected, hands touching my shoulder, voices speaking softly. Nothing felt real. Nothing. The only thing I remember clearly is sitting beside Noah one last time, holding his hand, staring at the face I had kissed goodnight thousands of times, trying to understand how someone could be there, and then not. How a person could fill every corner of your life one day, and leave a silence so massive the next. I remember brushing his hair back. I remember telling him I loved him. I remember begging the universe for one more minute. Just one. But life doesn't negotiate, and cancer doesn't care. By sunrise, my son was gone, 9 years old. 9, the number echoed endlessly in my head. 9, 9, 9, as though repeating it would somehow make sense of it. It never did. And it never would. The funeral happened 6 days later. I don't remember most of it. People always tell grieving parents the same things. He's in a better place. He's not suffering anymore. Stay strong. I know they mean well. I truly do, but when your child dies, those words don't help. Nothing helps. There is no sentence powerful enough, no wisdom deep enough, no comfort sufficient enough. There is only survival. 1 minute at a time, 1 breath at a time, 1 day at a time, and even that feels impossible. The church was full, far fuller than I expected. Teachers, neighbors, hospital staff, parents from school, friends, people who genuinely loved Noah, people who genuinely cared. And then, my parents walked in. I hadn't spoken to them since Noah died. Not once. Not because I was angry, because I had nothing left to say. My mother approached me carefully. Her eyes were red. My father looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. "Fiona," I stared at her. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, I didn't move either. "We're so sorry," I nodded. Nothing more. She waited, as though expecting conversation. Forgiveness. Connection, something. I had none of those things available. Not anymore. Eventually, she stepped back, and for the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in her eyes, as if she was beginning to realize that some damage doesn't heal automatically. Some damage stays. After the funeral, people gradually return to their lives, which is normal. That's how life works. The world keeps moving, even when yours stops. The casseroles stopped arriving. The flowers eventually died. The sympathy cards slowed down, and then one day, the house became quiet. Too quiet. Noah's room remained exactly as he left it. His shoes stayed beside the door. His books remained on the shelf. His drawings still hung on the refrigerator. I couldn't move anything. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Every object felt sacred. Every object felt dangerous. Every object carried memories. One afternoon, Lily walked into the kitchen holding Noah's favorite hoodie. "Mom, yeah, does this still smell like him?" I nearly broke right there. Instead, I nodded. "Probably." She hugged it tightly, then whispered, "I don't want to forget." Neither did I, that was the problem. Forgetting felt impossible. But remembering hurt, and somehow both things existed at the same time. The first month after Noah died was the darkest period of my life. Not because I wanted to stop living, because I didn't know how to keep living. There is a difference. I still had Lily, I still had Mason. They needed me. So every morning I got up, packed lunches, made breakfast, signed school papers, answered questions. Pretended functioning was the same thing as healing. It wasn't. But it was enough to get through each day. Then, exactly 1 month after the funeral, someone knocked on my door, 3 sharp knocks. I almost ignored them. I wasn't in the mood for visitors. Most days I wasn't in the mood for anything. The knocking continued. I opened the door and froze. My parents stood there, holding grocery bags, looking nervous. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then my mother smiled awkwardly. "We brought dinner." I stared. Dinner. Now they had time. Now they were available. Now they wanted to help. My father cleared his throat. "We thought maybe you could use some support." The irony nearly made me laugh. Support. 1 month too late. My son was already buried. The chemotherapy appointments were over. The hospital visits were over. The childcare crisis was over. Everything they refused to help with was over. I looked at the grocery bags, then at them, then back at the bags. And suddenly something inside me hardened. Not rage, not revenge, something colder, something clearer. Understanding, because for the first time, I wasn't desperate anymore. I wasn't asking. I wasn't hoping. I wasn't waiting for them to become different people. I finally saw them exactly as they were. And once you truly see someone, you can't unsee them. "Why are you here?" The question seemed to surprise them. My mother blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why are you here now?" Silence. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother forced another smile. "We're your parents." I nodded slowly. "Interesting. What does that mean?" I looked directly at her. "It means Noah needed grandparents." The smile disappeared. Instantly. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them could, because there was no defense, no explanation, no justification, only truth. And truth can be incredibly uncomfortable, especially when it's accurate. My father finally sighed. "Can we come in?" For several seconds I considered saying no. Then I stepped aside. Not because I wanted company, because I wanted answers. And somewhere deep down, I had a feeling this conversation was going to reveal more than either of them intended. What I didn't know yet was that hidden inside Noah's bedroom sat a simple notebook. A notebook that would eventually expose every person who abandoned us. A notebook that Noah had been quietly writing in for months. And what was written inside it would change everything. Or after my parents came inside, the house felt strangely crowded. Not because there were too many people, because there were too many ghosts. Every room still carried Noah, his laugh, his voice, his presence. And watching my parents sit at the same kitchen table they hadn't bothered helping me at for months made something inside me feel numb. My mother unpacked containers from the grocery bags. Lasagna, bread, salad, the kind of meal people bring when they don't know what else to do. Normally, it would have been a thoughtful gesture. Now it felt like an apology disguised as dinner. Nobody spoke for a while. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the windows. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "How are the kids doing?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the question felt absurd. How were the kids doing? Their brother was dead. How exactly were they supposed to be doing? Lily cries at night. My mother lowered her eyes. Mason still asks when Noah is coming home. The silence became heavier. My father stared at the table. Neither of them had a response. Neither of them should have. There wasn't one. After another minute, my mother spoke. We didn't realize things were this bad. I looked at her, actually looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I realized she believed that. She genuinely believed it, not because she hadn't been told, because she hadn't wanted to know. There's a difference. People often think neglect comes from ignorance. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it comes from convenience. If you don't ask questions, you don't have to hear answers. If you don't look too closely, you don't have to feel guilty. My mother had spent months protecting herself from reality. Now reality was sitting directly across from her, and she couldn't avoid it anymore. You knew he had cancer. Her eyes filled with tears. We knew. You knew I was alone. Silence. You knew I was begging for help. My father shifted in his chair. Fiona, no. My voice remained calm. Surprisingly calm. I just want to understand. Nobody answered, because there wasn't an answer. At least not one that sounded acceptable out loud. Eventually, my mother whispered, "We thought he would get better." The sentence hit me harder than any excuse, because suddenly everything made sense. They hadn't helped because they never expected consequences. They thought Noah would survive. They thought the crisis would pass. They thought eventually everyone would move on. Helping required sacrifice. Ignoring it required optimism. And optimism was easier. Until it wasn't. That night after they left, I couldn't sleep. The conversation kept replaying. Not because it gave me closure, because it gave me clarity. And clarity can hurt. Around midnight, I wandered upstairs, past Lily's room, past Mason's room, until I reached Noah's door. The room remained untouched, exactly as it had been. His baseball glove sat on a shelf. His soccer trophies lined the dresser. His favorite dinosaur blanket remained folded at the foot of the bed. I sat down slowly. The mattress dipped beneath my weight. For several minutes, I simply stared. Sometimes grief isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just sitting quietly in an empty room, missing someone. Then my eyes landed on something near the nightstand. A notebook. Blue cover. Worn edges. I frowned. I didn't recognize it. Noah had dozens of notebooks. School notebooks, drawing notebooks, random notebooks, but this one felt different. I picked it up. The cover had no title, no label, nothing. I opened it. The first page contained a date, then a few lines written in Noah's handwriting. Small, neat, careful, my heartbeat slowed. I started reading. Mom cried in the bathroom today, but she thought I didn't hear. I froze. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I kept reading. She smiles a lot when people are around. Another line. But she doesn't smile when she thinks nobody is looking. My chest tightened. I turned the page and found another entry, then another, each one written during treatment, each one describing things Noah noticed. Things I thought I had hidden, things I thought children didn't see. Apparently they did. Apparently he saw everything. The notebook slipped slightly in my hands. I swallowed hard, then continued reading. The next few entries focused on the hospital. Nurses he liked, doctors he trusted, funny conversations, bad cafeteria food, normal things, sweet things, painful things. Every page felt like hearing his voice again. For the first time in weeks, I smiled, actually smiled. Then I reached an entry that changed everything. The date was 2 months before he died. The handwriting looked shakier. The sentences were shorter, but the words were clear. Grandma called today. I blinked. Grandma, I kept reading. She asked if I was feeling better. A pause, then I told her Mom was tired. My stomach tightened. The next line made me sit upright. Grandma said Mom worries too much. I frowned, then continued. Grandma said people shouldn't make everything about cancer. The room seemed to tilt, slowly, barely, but enough, because I knew my mother. And I knew exactly how she sounded when she said things like that. Casually, dismissively, as if she was discussing weather. I turned the page and found another entry a week later. Another phone call, another conversation, another observation. And this one was worse, much worse. Grandpa said Mom should stop asking everyone for favors. I stared at the words, reading them again, then again, then again. The sentence didn't change. It remained exactly what I thought it was. My hands started shaking, not from grief, from realization, because suddenly I wasn't looking at isolated moments anymore. I was looking at a pattern Noah had documented without even realizing it. And the deeper I read, the clearer that pattern became. By 2 a.m, I had finished nearly half the notebook, and one terrifying truth was beginning to emerge. My parents hadn't simply refused to help. They had spent months talking about me, judging me, dismissing me, minimizing what was happening, even while Noah listened, even while he was fighting for his life. And somehow, the notebook suggested there might be even more, something bigger, something I hadn't discovered yet. I closed the notebook slowly, then stared out the bedroom window. Rain continued falling outside, soft, for the first time since Noah died. I wasn't just grieving, I was starting to ask questions. And something told me those questions were about to lead somewhere none of us expected. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Noah's handwriting. Every time I tried thinking about something else, another line from the notebook resurfaced. Grandma said people shouldn't make everything about cancer. Grandpa said Mom should stop asking everyone for favors. The words kept replaying, not because they were shocking, because they confirmed something I had spent months refusing to believe. My parents knew exactly what was happening. They hadn't been confused. They hadn't misunderstood. They hadn't been overwhelmed. They had simply decided my crisis wasn't important enough to interrupt their lives. There was a strange comfort in finally knowing that. Painful clarity is still clarity. And after months of questioning myself, I was tired of making excuses for people who never made excuses for themselves. That afternoon, after dropping Lily and Mason at school, I returned home and opened the notebook again. This time I started from the beginning. Slowly, carefully, looking for details I might have missed. The entries stretched back almost a year. Some were only a few sentences. Others filled entire pages. Many were exactly what you'd expect from a 9-year-old. Stories about soccer practice, complaints about homework, arguments with his little brother, his crush on a girl named Ava. The normal things children write when they don't know life is about to become complicated. Then the entries started changing, subtly at first, then dramatically. The leukemia relapse appeared gradually. Fear appeared gradually. Questions appeared gradually, but something else appeared too. Observations. Noah had been paying attention, far more attention than anyone realized, especially when adults thought he wasn't listening. Around noon, I found an entry that made me stop. The date was 3 months before his relapse. At the time, everyone believed he was healthy. The entry began normally. Then halfway through the page, he wrote, "Mom and Grandma fought today." I frowned. I didn't remember that. I kept reading. Grandma said Mom always makes things harder than they need to be. The memory slowly returned. A family barbecue, a small disagreement. Nothing important. At least that's what I thought at the time. Then came the next line, the line that made my stomach tighten. Grandma said nobody likes being around sad people. I stared at the sentence, reading it twice, 3 times, 4, because suddenly I remembered exactly when it happened. I had been talking about follow-up scans, about the anxiety that comes with waiting, about the fear every parent of a cancer survivor carries, and my mother had rolled her eyes. I remembered that now. I remembered laughing awkwardly, changing the subject, pretending it didn't bother me, the way I always did. The notebook rested quietly in my lap, and for the first time I began seeing my relationship with my parents differently. Not through grief, through history, because this hadn't started with Noah's relapse. This pattern existed long before. I had simply spent years normalizing it. 3 days later my mother called. I almost ignored it, almost. Instead I answered. "Hello. Hi, sweetheart." The word felt strange now, artificial, like something rehearsed. "Hi, we were wondering if we could stop by tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair. "Why?" The silence lasted longer than usual. Finally she answered. "We miss the kids." The kids, not you, not Noah, not us. The kids, interesting. I glanced toward the notebook sitting beside me, then back toward the window. What for? We'd just like to spend time together. I almost asked where that desire had been 6 months ago. Instead, I said, I'll think about it. Another pause, then, Fiona. Something in her voice had changed. Nervousness, uncertainty, fear, tiny amounts, but enough to notice. Yes, we know you're angry. I looked at the notebook again. The pages filled with Noah's observations, his experiences, his memories, and suddenly I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out weeks ago. What remained was disappointment, and disappointment lasts much longer. I'm not angry. Then what's wrong? The answer came surprisingly easily. I see things differently now. She became very quiet. Then, what does that mean? I almost told her, almost mentioned the notebook, almost mentioned Noah's entries. But something stopped me. Instinct. The same instinct that had been growing stronger every day. So instead I simply said, It means I'm thinking. And then I ended the call. That evening I kept reading, entry after entry, page after page. And eventually I found something unexpected. Not about my parents, about Vanessa, my ex-husband's wife, the woman who had asked what she would get out of helping. Apparently Noah remembered her too, very clearly. One entry described a birthday dinner. Another described a school event. Then I found an entry written shortly after the relapse, and suddenly the room felt colder. Noah, I whispered. His handwriting filled the page. Dad and Vanessa were arguing. I continued reading. She said helping us would make everything harder. My chest tightened. The next line was worse, much worse. She said cancer people always want something. I stopped breathing for a second. Actually stopped, then forced myself to continue. She said if Dad starts helping Mom, he'll never stop. I closed my eyes, slowly, carefully, because suddenly I understood something. The abandonment hadn't been spontaneous. It hadn't happened separately. The people around me had been having conversations, private conversations, conversations I never knew about, and many of those conversations shared the same theme. Helping Fiona is inconvenient. Helping Noah is inconvenient. Their suffering is inconvenient. The realization made me physically sick, not because I needed their help anymore, because Noah had heard those things. A child, a scared child, a child fighting cancer, listening while adults discussed whether he was worth the inconvenience. I set the notebook down and walked outside. The evening air felt cool against my skin. I stood on the porch for nearly 20 minutes, trying to calm myself, trying to think, trying not to imagine Noah hearing those conversations. But I couldn't stop. And that's when something shifted. For months, grief had consumed everything. Now another feeling was emerging. Not revenge, not hatred. Responsibility. Because Noah's notebook wasn't just a journal anymore. It was evidence. Evidence of who people had been when nobody thought their actions would matter later. And the more I read, the more I suspected the notebook wasn't finished revealing its secrets. 2 nights later, I reached the final third of the journal, and that's when I found the entry, the one that changed everything, the one that transformed grief into understanding. The date was only 6 weeks before Noah died. His handwriting looked weaker, more uneven. The treatment had clearly been taking a toll, yet he had still written, still observed, still recorded. The page began normally. Then halfway down he wrote, "Today I heard Grandpa talking to Uncle Steve." I frowned. Uncle Steve. I kept reading. Grandpa said Mom always exaggerates. My stomach tightened. The next sentence hit even harder. Grandpa said Noah will probably be okay anyway. I swallowed. Hard. Then came the final line. The line that made me sit upright in my chair. The line that suddenly connected dozens of unanswered questions. The line that explained everything. Grandpa said that's why they didn't need to cancel their cruise. I froze, completely froze. Cruise. My heart started pounding. Because my parents had told me they had commitments. They had never explained what those commitments were. I had assumed medical issues, family responsibilities, something important, something unavoidable. But now, for the first time, I realized there was another possibility, a possibility that would reframe everything. I turned the page desperately, looking for more, looking for context, looking for confirmation. But the next entry discussed something else entirely. The explanation wasn't there. Not yet. Still, the seed had been planted. And once the idea entered my mind, I couldn't ignore it. What exactly had my parents chosen over their grandson? And why did I suddenly suspect the answer was far worse than I ever imagined? For 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about the cruise. A choice. Every betrayal eventually comes down to a choice. People like to hide behind circumstances, complications. But eventually, if you strip everything away, there is usually a decision underneath. Someone chose comfort over kindness towards their daughter and grandson. Convenience over compassion. They chose themselves. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had never actually asked my parents what those commitments were. At the time, I was too overwhelmed, too scared, too focused on Noah. I didn't have the energy to investigate it. Now I did, and once the question entered my mind, it refused to leave. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A week later, my cousin Rachel called. We hadn't spoken much since Noah's funeral, not because we were fighting. Life had simply become complicated. "Hey, how are you holding up?" "Hi." We talked for a few minutes, the kids, work, family, the usual things. Then she casually mentioned something. Something so small she probably didn't even realize its significance. "My parents finally convinced your parents to book another cruise with them next year." I sat upright. "What?" Rachel laughed. "You know how obsessed they are with those things." My heart started beating faster. I tried to sound casual. "They travel together often, pretty much every year." The room suddenly felt very quiet. I looked toward the notebook sitting on my coffee table. "When did that start?" "Oh, years ago." "Years. Interesting, very interesting." I kept my voice neutral. "What about last year? The Alaska trip?" There it was. The words hit me instantly, because Noah's relapse had happened during the exact same period. My pulse quickened. "Yeah," Rachel laughed. "They almost canceled." "Almost?" I swallowed hard. "What do you mean almost?" "Your grandmother was pressuring them." My stomach tightened. "Why?" Rachel sounded confused. "Asking because of Noah, obviously." Suddenly, every sound disappeared. Every distraction vanished. "Your grandmother thought they should stay." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even think properly. Rachel continued, completely unaware of what she was confirming. "But your dad said there wasn't much they could do anyway. And they said you were okay with that." The sentence landed like a punch, not because it surprised me, because hearing it from someone else made it real, very real, painfully real. "Wait, what?" "Yeah, they left. And said I was okay with that." "Fiona," I realized she was waiting for me to respond. I forced myself to speak. "Yeah, right, I remember, thanks." "For what?" But I had already ended the call. That night I opened Noah's notebook again. This time I wasn't looking for memories. I was looking for facts, dates, references, mentions of family gatherings, comments from relatives, observations from phone calls. Small details that seemed insignificant individually. But together they painted a picture, a very ugly picture. My parents had known exactly how serious things were. The evidence was everywhere. Not only did they know, they discussed it constantly. They just didn't want responsibility attached to that knowledge. That realization changed something inside me. For months I had viewed myself as the abandoned one, the grieving mother. Now another role was emerging, witness, because Noah had left behind a record. 2 days later, my mother called again. This time I answered immediately, not because I wanted to talk, because I wanted information. "Hello, hi sweetheart." The familiar greeting no longer affected me. "Hi, can we see the kids this weekend?" I leaned back. "Why?" A pause, then, "We miss them." Interesting, again, always the same answer, never specific. Just vague enough to sound reasonable. I glanced at Noah's notebook, then made a decision, a small one but important. "Sure, come over Sunday." Relief immediately entered her voice. "Really?" "Yes, Mom." "All right, dear." I ended the call, then sat quietly, thinking/planning, because for the first time in my life, I was paying attention. Sunday arrived. My parents showed up carrying gifts, too many expensive gifts. The kind people buy when they don't know how to repair relationships. Lily received art supplies. Mason received toys. Both children were thrilled. Children usually are. They don't recognize guilt when it's wrapped in shiny packaging. I watched from the kitchen, saying very little, listening carefully, observing, and eventually something happened. My mother picked up a framed photo of Noah, the one taken after his first remission, the one where he was smiling, healthy, happy, alive. Her eyes filled with tears. Then she whispered, "We never thought this would happen." The sentence instantly caught my attention. Never thought. There it was again, the same logic, the same justification, the same excuse, not malicious, not cruel. Their behavior wasn't driven by hatred. It was driven by convenience. Convenience disguised as practicality. Convenience pretending to be reason. And somehow that realization hurt even more. Because hatred at least acknowledges your importance. Convenience treats you like background noise. After they left, I found myself standing in Noah's room again. The notebook rested on his desk, waiting. By now I had read most of it. Only a few pages remained. Yet something told me the biggest revelation was still ahead. I sat down, opened the final section, and started reading. The entries became shorter near the end. Treatment had exhausted him. Writing clearly required more effort. Still, he kept recording things, kept observing, kept noticing. Then I reached an entry dated less than 3 weeks before his death, and my breath caught. Immediately. The page began with a hospital visit, then a conversation. A conversation involving someone I never expected, my father. Apparently he had visited Noah alone that day. I barely remembered it. The treatments had blurred everything together, but Noah remembered. And Noah had written it down. The entry read, "Grandpa asked if Mom was still asking people for help. I said yes." The next sentence made my stomach twist. Grandpa laughed. I stared at the word, reading it repeatedly. Hoping I misunderstood, I hadn't. The handwriting was clear. The meaning was clear. Everything was clear. Then came the final line. That transformed suspicion into certainty. That made my hands shake. Grandpa said sometimes people need to learn how to stand on their own. The room became silent, completely silent, because suddenly I wasn't dealing with indifference anymore. I was dealing with judgment. My father hadn't simply refused to help. He believed refusing to help was teaching me something. Teaching. The word echoed through my mind, as if my son's illness had been some kind of life lesson, as if desperation deserved punishment. I slowly closed the notebook, then stared out the window. The sun was setting. Orange light spilled across Noah's room. Soft, beautiful, I felt something beyond grief. Clarity, cold, undeniable clarity. I finally understood who my parents truly were. But what I didn't know yet was that another discovery was coming. A discovery hidden inside an old family email chain. A discovery that would expose exactly what my parents had been saying about me behind my back. And when I found it, the notebook would stop being a private memory and become something much bigger, something nobody in the family would be able to ignore. Part 7, the family email chain, wasn't something I went looking for. I found it by accident. At least that's what I told myself at first. The truth is, once I started seeing the pattern, I couldn't stop looking. Every conversation felt different now. Every memory felt different. Every explanation I had accepted over the years suddenly deserved a second look. The discovery happened on a Thursday afternoon. The kids were at school. The house was quiet. I was sorting through old documents on my laptop when a notification appeared. A shared family folder. One I hadn't opened in years. Mostly holiday photos, birthday pictures, vacation albums. The kind of digital clutter families accumulate over time. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, I clicked. Maybe it was curiosity. And within 20 minutes, I found something that made my stomach drop. An archived email thread, 37 messages. The subject line, "Fiona situation." I stared at those words for several seconds. Then I opened the thread. And everything changed. The first emails were from my aunt, concerned, compassionate, asking how everyone could help, offering rides, offering meals, offering childcare, normal responses, human responses. Then came my mother's reply. A short email, only 4 sentences, but I felt physically sick reading them. "Thank you, but Fiona tends to make things sound worse than they are." I read it again. I continued scrolling. A cousin asked whether Noah's relapse was serious. My mother's response appeared 12 minutes later. The doctors are optimistic. That wasn't true, not even close. By the time she wrote that email, doctors had already expressed concern. They weren't optimistic. They were worried. Very worried. My hands started shaking. I kept reading, message after message, email after email, each one revealing another layer, another excuse, another minimization, another distortion. Then I reached my father's messages, and somehow they were worse, much worse. One email had been sent after I asked family members for childcare help. I remembered sending that request. I remembered feeling humiliated. I remembered how difficult it was to ask. Apparently my father remembered too. His response sat there in black and white, preserved forever, unable to be denied. Fiona has always relied too heavily on emotional appeals. My son had leukemia, and my father described my request for help as an emotional appeal. I stared at the screen, trying to understand how a human being writes something like that, a grandfather. But the answers didn't come, only more emails, more revelations, more evidence. Then I found the message, the one that connected everything. The one that explained why nobody seemed to understand how serious Noah's condition actually was. The one that changed the entire story. The email came from my mother, sent to 6 relatives, 3 weeks after Noah's relapse. The subject line was ordinary. The content wasn't. I read it once, then twice, then a third time because I genuinely couldn't believe it. Please don't panic over Fiona's updates. My chest tightened. I continued reading. She tends to catastrophize. I gripped the edge of the desk and kept reading. The doctors expect treatment to work. That wasn't true. The children are fine. Also not true. And she has more support than she realizes. The lie was so absurd I almost laughed. More support than she realizes. I was alone, completely alone, desperately alone. And my own mother had spent months convincing relatives that everything was under control. Suddenly, dozens of confusing interactions made sense. The relatives who seemed oddly calm, the people who never followed up, the cousins who acted as if nothing serious was happening. They weren't ignoring reality. They had been given a different version of reality by my parents. The screen glowing in front of me, the notebook beside me, the 2 pieces fitting together perfectly, Noah's observations. The pattern was undeniable now. My parents hadn't merely refused to help. They had actively downplayed the crisis. Repeatedly, consistently, for months. And because of that, other people never realized how bad things truly were. A horrifying thought suddenly entered my mind. How many people would have helped if they had known the truth? How many offers never come because my parents had convinced everyone there was no emergency? How many opportunities disappeared before they even reached me? I leaned back slowly, my heart pounding, because that question had no answer. That evening I called my Aunt Linda because I wanted confirmation. She answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart. Can I ask you something?" "Of course. If you had known how serious Noah's relapse was, would you have helped?" Silence. Instant silence. "Then, Fiona, what do you mean?" I closed my eyes, already knowing the answer. "Would you have helped?" Her voice cracked immediately. "Oh my God." I felt my stomach drop because she understood, immediately, without explanation. Without details, without context, she understood, and that told me everything. We thought things were stable. There it was, the lie, the exact lie. We thought treatment was working. Another lie. We thought you had childcare. Another lie. Every sentence matched the emails. Every sentence matched the narrative my parents had created. Tears filled my eyes, not because of grief, because of confirmation, because for months I had wondered whether anyone cared. Now I knew. Many people cared, they simply never knew. My aunt started crying, actually crying. I would have come every day. I swear I would have. I know, we didn't understand. I covered my eyes, and for the first time since Noah died, I cried from something other than loss. I cried from anger, the anger that comes when you finally understand the truth. Over the next week, I made more calls, not accusations, just questions, simple questions. And every answer pointed in the same direction. People had been misled, not intentionally by them, intentionally by my parents. Each conversation revealed another missing piece, another misunderstanding, another opportunity that never happened. By the end of the week, I had enough information to stop wondering. The truth was clear, painfully clear, and for the first time, I began thinking about what came next. Not revenge, accountability. Noah deserved better. And the people who spent months rewriting reality deserved to face reality themselves. What I didn't know yet was that the opportunity would arrive sooner than expected. Because 2 weeks later, my parents would organize a large family gathering, where they expected sympathy, comfort, everyone to see them as grieving grandparents. They had no idea what I had discovered. They had no idea about the emails. They had no idea about the notebook. And they definitely had no idea what I was planning to bring with me. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. A family group message cheerful. My cousin Rachel was hosting a large summer gathering at her property outside the city. Barbecue, games, swimming. One of those events where relatives who barely spoke all year suddenly acted like best friends. Normally, I would have found an excuse not to go. After Noah's death, family gatherings felt impossible. Too many people pretending everything was normal. This time was different, because the moment I saw my mother's enthusiastic response in the group chat, I knew something. She expected sympathy. She expected support. She expected everyone to continue believing the version of events she had carefully created. I wasn't sure I wanted to protect that version anymore. 3 days before the gathering, my mother called. "Are you coming Saturday?" I could hear excitement in her voice. Actual excitement, as if this were some wonderful family reunion. "Probably. That's great." I remained quiet. She continued talking, telling me who would be there, which cousins were traveling, which relatives hadn't attended in years. Eventually, she laughed. "It'll be good for everyone to see you." What she really meant was, people are worried. People feel sorry for you. People want to comfort you. People see you as the grieving mother, and by extension, they see us as the grieving grandparents. The thought made me strangely calm, not angry, just observant. The family believed everyone had done their best. The family believed nobody was responsible. The family believed wrong. The night before the gathering, I opened Noah's notebook again. I had lost count of how many times I'd read it. Certain pages were already becoming familiar. Certain entries already lived permanently in my memory. But this time I wasn't reading. I was organizing, highlighting dates, marking pages, adding sticky notes, building a timeline. The notebook sat beside my laptop. The email printouts sat beside the notebook. For hours I worked silently, everything preserved, everything clear. By midnight I had assembled a complete timeline. Phone calls, emails, conversations, comments, patterns, the entire picture. And once I saw it laid out together, the truth became impossible to ignore. My parents hadn't made one bad decision. They had made dozens, over and over again, for months. I stared at the final page. They really did this? The realization felt certain, and certainty is powerful. Saturday arrived bright and warm. The weather was perfect. The kind of summer day people remember fondly. Children ran through sprinklers. Music played from outdoor speakers. Relatives laughed beneath large shade trees. Everything looked happy, normal, peaceful. The exact kind of environment where uncomfortable truths usually remain hidden. I arrived with Lily and Mason around noon. The moment we stepped out of the car, relatives approached. Hugs, condolences, questions, concern. More concern than I had received during Noah's treatment. The irony wasn't lost on me. My Aunt Linda hugged me tightly. "I've been thinking about you constantly." I smiled softly. "I know." And for the first time, I actually believed her, because now I understood she had never known the full story. Most of them hadn't. My parents arrived 30 minutes later. People surrounded them, comforted them, asked how they were coping. My mother accepted every hug, every expression of concern. Watching from across the yard, I felt something unexpected. Distance with a bit of hatred, just separation. Then something happened. A relative I'd barely spoken to in years approached my father, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did everything you could." My father nodded sadly. "Thank you," that was it. 2 words. No correction, no clarification, no honesty. acceptance of praise he hadn't earned. I felt my stomach tighten. They weren't just avoiding accountability. They were benefiting from the misunderstanding. And that changed everything. Around 3 o'clock. Several relatives gathered beneath a large covered patio. The conversation drifted naturally toward Noah. Stories, memories, funny moments, favorite experiences. The mood became emotional. People cried, people laughed, people remembered. Then my cousin Rachel spoke. "I still can't believe how strong Fiona was through all of it." Several people nodded. Someone else added, "I don't know how she managed everything alone." Silence. Tiny, brief, but noticeable. My mother's expression changed immediately, just for a second, then disappeared. Then my Aunt Linda spoke, and suddenly everything shifted. "Honestly, if we'd known how serious things were, we would have helped more." I felt my father's posture change. Barely, but enough. My mother's smile froze. Nobody knew what to say next, except me. The moment when truth and fiction finally occupied the same room, and only one could survive. I took a slow breath, looked around the table, then quietly asked, "Would you have?" Every head turned toward me. Aunt Linda nodded immediately. "Of course." Another relative agreed, then another. One by one, without hesitation, without uncertainty. My parents weren't speaking at all. They just sat there, watching, waiting, hoping. I looked around the patio at my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. None of them knew they were sitting in the middle of a lie. Aunt Linda continued, "Of course we would have helped." She looked genuinely confused, almost hurt. "Why wouldn't we?" Several people nodded immediately. My cousin Rachel spoke next. "If I'd known childcare was a problem, I would have taken the kids whenever you needed." Another cousin raised her hand slightly. "Same." Then another. Someone asked, "We were concerned when we got to know, but we got the news everything is already being handled." Aunt Linda nodded. Several others, too. I glanced toward my parents. My mother stared at the table. My father suddenly seemed fascinated by his drink. Neither spoke. Neither corrected anyone, hoping the conversation would move on. It didn't. "Actually," every head turned toward me again. I used to wonder why so many people seemed distant during Noah's treatment. Nobody interrupted. I thought maybe people didn't care. Aunt Linda immediately shook her head. "Oh, darling, I know that now." Several relatives exchanged confused looks. Uncle Mark spoke. "Why no bod told us the truth?" He looked at my parents. My father finally spoke. "Fiona," just my name, nothing else. A warning disguised as concern. I ignored it. "I recently found some old emails." The reaction was immediate, not from everyone, from my parents. My mother's face lost color. My father's shoulders stiffened. "What emails?" Rachel asked. I reached into my bag and removed a folder. The same folder I'd spent days organizing, every timeline. My mother finally found her voice. "Fiona, this isn't the place." Interesting, and why not? Because she already knew exactly what I was talking about. "Show us honey." Aunt Linda was genuinely concerned and felt guilty. I placed the folder beside me, still unopened, then looked at my mother. Was the hospital the place? The question landed hard. My mother blinked. Was watching Noah silently go through chemotherapy the place? Was sitting alone with 3 kids the place? The patio felt frozen. My father finally straightened in his chair. "You're grieving." The statement almost made me laugh, not because it was ridiculous, because it was predictable. I nodded slowly. "I am still grieving. But I have proofs too." Then I opened the folder, and everything changed. The first document was simple, 1 page, 1 email. I handed it directly to Aunt Linda. She began reading. At first her expression remained neutral. Then confusion appeared, then disbelief, then anger, actual anger. "What is this?" Nobody answered. She looked directly at my mother. "Did you write this?" My mother's face went pale. Rachel reached for the page, then another cousin, then another. Soon multiple people were reading. And the atmosphere transformed completely. The comfortable family gathering disappeared, replaced by something else, something much more honest. Rachel looked stunned. "You told everyone things were fine." My mother swallowed. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" No answer. The second email hit even harder. The one about me exaggerating. The one about emotional appeals. The one about treatment being under control. I didn't need to explain anything. The words explained themselves. People read silently, then looked up, then read again, trying to convince themselves they had misunderstood. They hadn't. The proof sat right there, in black and white. My Aunt Linda suddenly stood up, actually stood. "I called you." She looked directly at my mother. "I asked if Fiona needed help." My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "I asked," her voice cracked, "and you told me everything was under control." The patio remained silent. Then Rachel asked the question that changed everything. "Wait." She looked at my father, then my mother, then back at the emails. "How many people got these?" Nobody answered. Rachel looked around the table, realization spreading across her face. "Oh my God." She understood, completely. The same realization I'd had days earlier. The same horrifying truth. Months of controlling the narrative. Months of making sure nobody felt urgency. And suddenly everyone else saw it too. My father finally tried to regain control. "That's not fair," Rachel immediately responded. "What's not fair? We didn't think it would escalate things." That made several relatives laugh, not because anything was funny, because the excuse sounded absurd. I quietly reached into my bag again, then pulled out something else. The notebook, Noah's notebook. The entire table fell silent. Instantly, I placed the notebook on the table. "This is Noah's," I said. For a moment I couldn't speak, because I was remembering his handwriting, his observations, child who noticed everything. Then I opened to one of the marked pages and began reading. "Grandpa said Mom should stop asking everyone for favors." The words echoed across the patio. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. I turned another page. "Grandma said people shouldn't make everything about cancer." Someone gasped, actually gasped. I kept reading fact after fact, observation after observation. The words of a little boy who had no reason to lie. The words of a child who simply recorded what he heard. And as I read, I watched the entire family slowly reevaluate the assumptions, years of beliefs. By the time I finished reading, nobody was looking at me anymore. They were looking at my parents, and the expressions on their faces said everything. Disappointment, shock, disbelief, anger, not loud anger, the quiet kind. My mother started crying, real tears, genuine tears, but for the first time, nobody rushed to comfort her. My father looked 20 years older than he had that morning, yet somehow neither of them spoke. "How could you guys?" "And why?" Rachel sighed. My mother immediately lowered her eyes. I took a slow breath, then opened another section of my folder. 3 weeks after Noah's relapse, I asked my parents for help. Everyone already knew that part. I was told they had commitments. What I didn't know was that those commitments were a 14-day Alaska cruise. The reaction was immediate, complete disbelief. Uncle Mark blinked. "What?" My Aunt Linda stared at my father. "You left," nobody answered. She repeated herself. "You actually left." My father finally spoke. "It wasn't that simple." The sentence hung there. Rachel asked it. "What part wasn't simple?" No answer came. Then my cousin John leaned forward. "You knew Noah had relapsed." My father nodded once. Reluctantly, Mark continued. "You knew Fiona needed help. And you went on vacation." My father rubbed his forehead. "We just couldn't process." Several people actually laughed. My Aunt Linda shook her head. "No, the unfair thing was leaving." My mother suddenly spoke. "We thought he'd get better." You see, every head turned toward me. "That's the problem." My mother looked confused. I could see tears streaming down her face. "What does that mean?" "It means you gambled. You bet on a good outcome. You assumed treatment would work. You assumed everything would be okay." My father's jaw tightened. "You assumed there would never be consequences for leaving." And for the first time, I saw genuine shame cross my parents' faces. Then something unexpected happened. Lily spoke, my 6-year-old daughter. "Grandma." Every adult turned toward her. My mother immediately looked up. "Yes, sweetheart." Lily hesitated. "Why didn't you come when Noah was sick?" The world stopped. A child asking a question. A question everyone already knew the answer to. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it, opened it again. "I am sorry, honey." My mother started crying harder. She hugged Lily. Lily got confused. She looked at me kind of scared. I slowly rubbed her hand. It's okay, hun. People stayed much longer after that. Everyone apologizing for not recognizing the pattern and need. Some words were sympathetic. The atmosphere had changed permanently. I should have checked on you. I should have called more. I should have come over. I should have asked questions. The apologies were genuine. And strangely enough, I accepted them. And now that they knew the truth, they weren't making excuses. They were taking responsibility. There is a huge difference. My parents were among the last to leave. The day was ending. My mother approached me alone, her eyes swollen from crying. I never meant for any of this to happen. I believed her. Choices were. You didn't mean for Noah to die. Fresh tears appeared. No. But you meant every decision before that. She flinched. The words hurt. I am sorry, please forgive me. I let her speak. You know, I think about it sometimes. But I never brought it up. I convinced myself that whatever happened wasn't our fault. But it was our fault. We couldn't save Noah, but we could have saved those moments with him, with you, when you needed us the most. Then she hugged me, and I believed every word she said. Eventually, she walked away. And I watched her go. Not with satisfaction. Just clarity. Over the next several months, relationships throughout the family started changing. Some would break completely. Others would strengthen. And my parents would discover that rebuilding trust is much harder than losing it. As for me, I started a new job and started focusing on myself and my kids. Relatives, and especially Aunt Linda, few cousins and Rachel started checking up on me. Not out of mercy or sympathy. Out of care, love, taking kids out, indoor plans. Life started to look beautiful. But I still sit sometimes, at Noah's bed holding his journal. It just gives me a sense of his presence. Like he is watching me and telling me, Mom, I am here, don't worry. And that's my story. Now I want to ask you that I always do. Who do you think was actually wrong here? Was I wrong for exposing my parents? Drop your thoughts down below if you ever encountered the similar or relatable situation in life. If you liked the story, there are more. For that, like and subscribe, so you can come back. Thanks for watching, folks.